I worry so much about children who enter kindergarten who don't know the front of the book from the back of a book, who barely know their real name. And how does the best kindergarten teacher in the world teach when there's such great disparities in ability coming in? So we have to challenge that. On the K-12 side, which so many of you have invested so much of your time and energy in, there are 4 basic reforms that we are pushing. We want to look at college-ready, career-ready, internationally benchmarked standards. The idea of 50 states doing their own thing under No Child Left Behind, I think, led to a dumbing down of standards, a race to the bottom rather than a race to the top. What worries me so much is that I think in too many places around the country, we are actually lying to children and lying to their parents. When a child hears they are meeting standards, when a parent hears their child is meeting standards, they presume, unfortunately incorrectly, that child's on track to be successful. But in too many places, because those standards are so low, that child who's meeting standards is barely able to graduate from high school and is woefully underprepared to be successful in college. And so we need to raise the bar, raise standards. As you know so well, our children aren't competing down the block or in the district or in the state or even in the country for jobs. Our children are competing with children in India and China. And we have to make sure that they have the skills and the ability to be successful in that competition. Secondly, we want states to have comprehensive data systems. We need to be able to track children throughout their educational trajectory. And so we need to tell a 4th grader, a 5th grader, an 8th grader, you're on track to be successful and go to a great college, or you're not. And these are your strengths, and these are your weaknesses, and these are things we have to work on together to help you prepare to be successful. When our children take tests in their sophomore and junior and senior year, quite frankly, there should be no surprises. We should know exactly where that child is, and we should be working all the way along to make sure that child is successful. Secondly, we need to be able to track our students back to their teachers, so we figure out over time which teachers are making a dramatic difference in the lives of our students. We have to put a spotlight on those teachers that are going way beyond the call of duty and transforming the opportunities for our children. And third, we have to track our teachers back to their schools of education, so we can determine over time whether or not those schools of education are producing the teachers that are helping our students accomplish what they need to do. Third, and again, I know I'm preaching to the choir on this, in our work, in the educational world, talent matters tremendously. And we cannot do enough to put a spotlight on the best and brightest, those teachers, those principals who go beyond the call of duty every single day. They are absolutely our unsung heroes in our country, and we cannot do enough to support them. So how can we better incent, reward, recognize, shine a spotlight on the best and brightest? How can we make sure the best and brightest are not just staying in the teaching profession, but are taking jobs in historically underserved communities, be that rural or inner city urban? I worry so much that historically there have been many disincentives and very few incentives for the best and brightest to go where they are needed most, and we have to reverse that. Third, how do we really take on and challenge those areas where we have critical need? Math and science and foreign language. I think we've had areas of shortage for decades. I think we need to think more creatively about that and pay our math and science, our foreign language teachers more. Spend more money to send those teachers back to school to make sure they have the skills they need to be successful. And then finally, particularly in our large urban areas, how do we turn around chronically underperforming schools? And I think there are 3 different types of schools. Where you see schools having great success, where you see long waiting lists, we need to replicate those schools and create many more of them. Where you see schools that are improving and getting better each year, we need to support that and continue to support teachers and principals that are doing that hard work every day. But let me be clear, where you have a handful of schools in any area that are not only low performing, but that are getting worse, where measures of growth and value are going south rather than north, where our children are not being prepared for a successful future, I think we have to challenge that status quo openly and honestly. And this was some of the toughest work we did back home in Chicago of closing underperforming schools. But we took schools that weren't working, where children weren't achieving, kept the children there, moved the adults out, brought in new teams of adults, same children, same socioeconomic challenges, same families, same communities, same buildings, different adults, different expectations. And those children over time perform 2 to 3 times better, not 2 or 3%. It put the lie into any myth or any stereotype that poor children can't learn, or minority children can't learn. What they need is us as adults to step up and expect the most from them. We are challenging every state and every district to think creatively about how they use current stimulus dollars to innovate in those 4 areas. And over the next 2 months, we will issue an RFP, a request for proposals, that will put an additional $5 billion on the table to invest in states and districts that are willing to step up and lead the country, not in a race to the bottom, but reversing that in a race to the top. And I hope all of you are starting to think about now how you can prepare your districts and your states to be competitive for literally billions of dollars that are yet to be put out. We are very interested in creative uses of time and talent and the transparent use of data to drive instruction, professional development, and accelerate student achievement. I'm convinced our school day is too short, our school week is too short, our school year is too short. Think about how you use stimulus dollars. Think about how you use the influx of Title I dollars to do something now, this summer. I worry so much about children who aren't lucky enough to have 2 parents at home, who aren't lucky enough to have a household filled with books, and we talk so much about summer reading loss. We saw children in Chicago who would get to a certain point in June, and they would come back in September and be further behind than when they left. That is absolutely heartbreaking. So think about how you use resources now to dramatically change those opportunities and give our children more of what they need, more instruction, more adults in their lives who care about them. Think about how you make your schools community schools, open much longer hours, bringing in not just more teachers, but nonprofits and social service agencies, and really making schools the center of communities. Secondly, as I talked about earlier, think about talent. How can we dramatically reverse the great talent flow out of the neighborhoods that need the most and really recruit and incent the best and brightest to work in the communities that in far too many places have been underserved, not for a year or 2 years or 5 years, but for decades. Finally, I want to challenge all of us to think not just about how we use resources differently, but also about how we interact differently with each other. Too often, our distrustful, dysfunctional relationships have been a part of the problem. Adult issues are issues hindering, getting in the way of children learning. And if we're serious about achieving better results, I think we have to think about behaving differently as well. I always try and look in the mirror first and be very self-critical. And having lived on the other side of the Department of Education for years, I have to be real honest. When the Department of Education used to call me in Chicago, that wasn't always a call I looked forward to. That was often a call about a compliance issue or some bureaucratic thing or an audit. Very little, very rarely did it have something to do with how you're going to help continue to accelerate student achievement. So it's easy for me to talk about, much harder to do, but I'm promising you and committing to you that we are trying to transform the Department of Education, not to be a compliance-driven bureaucracy, but to be an engine of innovation.